Commander Quan was having the worst day of his career, and it had barely started. He sat in his command chair aboard the hegemony patrol vessel Dominant Reach, trying to force down another spoonful of the gray nutrition paste that passed for breakfast in deep space. The stuff tasted like recycled metal shavings, mixed with disappointment. That's when every alarm on the bridge decided to have a screaming contest. Quan jumped so hard he launched his breakfast across the bridge, watching in horror as it splattered against the main view screen. His communications officer, a nervous young recruit named Park, was frantically jabbing at his control panel like it had personally insulted his mother. "What's happening?" Quan barked, wiping paste from his uniform. Park's face had gone completely white. His hands shook as he stared at his instruments. "Sir, something just appeared on our sensors. Something big. Really, really big." Quan rushed to the sensor station, shoving Park aside to see for himself. What he saw made his blood freeze. A massive energy signature had just materialized from what should have been empty space. The computer was trying to calculate the size of whatever had appeared, and the numbers kept getting bigger and bigger until they didn't make sense anymore. "That can't be right," Quan muttered, running the scan again. "Park, tell me you're not playing some stupid joke on your commanding officer." "No, sir," Park squeaked. "I wish I was, but look at the visual feed." The main screen cleared, showing them what had triggered every alarm on the ship. Floating in the darkness of space was something that shouldn't exist. It was a ship, but calling it a ship was like calling a mountain a pebble. The thing was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, and it looked ancient beyond imagination. The hull was covered in scars that told stories of countless battles. Deep gouges ran across its surface, like old wounds that had never properly healed. Strange markings covered every inch, symbols that looked familiar but belonged to no known civilization. The metal itself seemed different, darker than anything in current use, as if it had been forged in the heart of dying stars.
"Is, sir,"
Park whispered, his voice barely audible over the humming of the ship's systems. "I'm running the design through our database. It's not matching anything. But the energy signature, it's definitely artificial. Someone built this thing." Quan stared at the impossible sight. In his 20 years of service with the hegemony, he'd seen a lot of strange things. Space was full of mysteries, ancient ruins, and technologies that barely made sense. But this was different. It felt important in a way that made his skin crawl. "How long has it been there?" he asked. "It wasn't there 30 seconds ago," Park replied. "It just appeared, like it was hiding in empty space and decided to say hello." That's when the communications panel lit up like a festival. Someone was trying to talk to them. The signal was strong, clear, and coming from the mysterious ship. Quan hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over the accept button. Whatever was about to happen, he had a feeling it was going to change everything. The transmission came through in perfect galactic standard. The common language used by all civilized species for official communications. The voice was calm, professional, and belonged to a human female. "This is Dr. Kim Ha-jin of the vessel Perseverance. We are aware of your presence and mean no harm. We request immediate cessation of all unauthorized mining operations currently being conducted in the Sol system." Park's mouth fell open so wide that Quan worried his jaw might actually detach. The Sol system. That was the old human homeworld, the place where Earth used to be before humanity went silent and disappeared from galactic history. "Did she just say what I think she said?" Park whispered. Quan's mind was racing. Every school child in the galaxy knew the story of humanity. 20,000 years ago, when the Galactic Council had formed and species began working together, humans had been invited to join. They'd refused, claiming they wanted to handle their own affairs. The Council had tried to convince them for decades, but humans remained stubborn. Eventually, the galaxy had given up. Trade routes were established around human space, and everyone just waited for them to change their minds. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. The humans never called. They never sent messages. They never left their little corner of space after. 1,000 years of complete silence. Most people assumed they'd destroyed themselves. After 5,000 years, it became a historical fact. After 10,000 years, humans became a cautionary tale, told two young species about the dangers of isolation and pride. After 20,000 years, they were barely a footnote in galactic history. But now there was a human ship sitting in front of them, and it was bigger than anything the galaxy had ever built. Sir Park said slowly, "Should I respond?" Quan realized. He'd been staring at the screen for several minutes without moving. His training kicked in, and he straightened his uniform. Whatever was happening here was way above his pay grade, but he was the ranking officer on the scene. "Dr. Kim Hajin," he said formally. "This is Commander Quan of the Hegemony patrol vessel Dominant Reach. We were not aware that any mining operations were taking place in the Sol system. Could you please clarify what you're referring to?" The response came immediately, as if the human had been expecting the question. "Commander Quan, our long range. Sensors have detected 17 unauthorized mining installations currently operating within the Sol system boundary. These installations have been extracting resources without permission from the Sol system's governing authority." Park leaned over and whispered urgently, "Sir, there is no governing authority in the Sol system. It's been empty for 20,000 years. Quan held up a hand for silence. Something very strange was happening here, and he needed to understand. "What before he did anything stupid, Dr. Kim, with respect. Galactic records indicate that the Sol system has been uninhabited for approximately 20 millennia. Are you claiming to represent some form of human government?" There was a pause, and when Dr. Kim responded, Quan could hear something that might have been amusement in her voice. "Commander, I understand your confusion. We've been away for quite some time, however. Humanity never abandoned our claim to the Sol system. We simply had other matters to attend to. Now we have returned, and we would appreciate it if the current mining operations could be relocated to avoid any unnecessary complications." Quan felt a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. This was definitely above his pay grade. This was above everyone's pay grade. Bah! If humans were really back, if they really had ships like the monster floating in front of him, then everything was about to change. He looked at Park, who was frantically trying to establish communication with headquarters. The young officer caught his eye and shook his head. They were too far out in deep space to get a message through quickly. Dr. Kim Quan said carefully, "I'm going to need to report this to my superiors. This is a significant development that will require discussion at the highest levels of galactic government." "Of course, Commander. You understand that our return may come as a surprise. We are prepared to wait while you contact your leadership. However, we would like those mining operations to cease within the next 72 hours. We prefer to handle these matters diplomatically, but we are prepared to take more direct action if necessary." The transmission ended, leaving Quan and Park staring at each other in stunned silence. Outside their small ship, the massive human vessel waited patiently, its ancient hull gleaming in the light of distant stars. Quan slowly sat back down in his command chair, his mind trying to process what had just happened. After 20,000 years of silence, humanity had returned, and they had brought ships that made the galaxy's most powerful warships look like toys. "Park," he said quietly, "I think we're about to make history." Ambassador Threx adjusted his ceremonial robes for the 5th time in 10 minutes, practicing his most important diplomatic smile in the reflection of his ship's polished walls. He'd been chosen for this mission because he was the Galactic Council's expert on handling primitive species. His job was simple: pat the humans on the head, give them some shiny trinkets, and gently guide them into accepting their place as junior members of galactic society. "This should be easy," he muttered to himself, checking his notes one more time. Humans have been isolated for 20,000 years. They're probably still using chemical rockets and wondering how to make fire burn in space. His aide and nervous creature with too many eyes approached cautiously. "Sir, the preliminary scans of their vessel are ... unusual. Perhaps we should approach with more caution." Threx waved dismissively. "Nonsense. I've handled dozens of species making their first contact with galactic civilization. They're all the same. It's overwhelmed, grateful, and eager to please." The key is to be firm but kind, like dealing with excited children. The ambassador's ship moved closer to the massive human vessel, and Threx got his first good look at what they were dealing with. Even he had to admit it was impressive. The thing was huge, certainly larger than anything he'd expected from a species that had been hiding in their home system for millennia. But size didn't mean sophistication. Lots of primitive species built big, clunky ships to compensate for their lack of advanced technology. "Open a channel," Threx commanded, straightening his robes and putting on his most patronizing diplomatic expression. "Let's welcome these humans back to civilization." A communication screen flickered to life, and Threx found himself staring at something he definitely hadn't expected. Instead of the cramped utilitarian bridge he'd anticipated, he was looking at what appeared to be a garden. A massive, beautiful garden with trees, flowers, streams of clear water flowing between carefully arranged stones. Dr. Kim Ha-jin stood in the center of this impossible space, wearing simple clothes that looked more like something you'd wear for a walk in the park than for commanding a starship. Behind her, Threx could see other humans moving about their business, tending to plants, children playing near a small pond, and what looked like birds flying freely through the air. "Impossible," Threx whispered to his aide. "No ship can contain a biosphere that large. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical." Double quotes. Dr. Kim smiled politely at the screen. "Ambassador Threx, I presume. We received your request for a diplomatic meeting. Thank you for coming all this way." Threx quickly composed himself, falling back on his prepared script. "Yes, well, we appreciate your enthusiasm for galactic participation. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I'm here to welcome humanity back to the galactic community. We understand that you've been through some difficult times during your isolation, but we're here to help." He paused, expecting the usual response. Most species at this point would be falling over themselves with gratitude, asking questions about galactic technology, begging for membership in the council. Dr. Kim just nodded politely and waited for him to continue. "We've prepared a comprehensive integration program," Threx continued, his confidence growing. "We'll start with basic technological upgrades to help you establish proper communication networks and gradually introduce you to galactic society. Of course, there will be some restrictions at first. New species typically need time to adjust to the responsibilities of galactic citizenship." Dr. Kim's smile widened slightly. "Thank you, Ambassador. It's very thoughtful of you. However, I think there may be some misunderstanding about our situation." Threx chuckled indulgently. "Ain't. I understand perfectly. 20,000 years of isolation must have been difficult. But don't worry, we've dealt with species who've fallen behind technologically before. With the right guidance, you'll catch up to galactic standards in just a few centuries." "Ambassador," Dr. Kim said gently, "we've been monitoring galactic communications for millennia. Your bureaucracy is adorably inefficient." The words hit Threx like a physical blow. He blinked several times, trying to process what he'd just heard. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "We've been listening to your communications," Dr. Kim explained patiently. "Council meetings, trade negotiations, military communications, cultural exchanges. We've been watching galactic civilization develop for quite some time. It's been fascinating, really, though we did notice some areas where improvements could be made." Threx's aide was frantically scanning through data on a portable tablet, his multiple eyes wide with panic. "Sir," he whispered urgently, "if they've been monitoring our communications, they know about the mining operations in the Sol system." "What mining operations?" Threx hissed back. "The ones that have been extracting resources from the Sol system for the past few decades. Since everyone thought the system was empty, various companies have been—" The aide's voice trailed off. As he realized the implications, Dr. Kim's expression hadn't changed. But something in her eyes suggested she'd heard every word of their whispered conversation. "We're also aware of the 17 unauthorized mining installations currently operating in our home system. We've been rather patient about it, but now that we're back, we'd appreciate if those operations could be relocated." Threx felt his carefully planned diplomatic mission crumbling around him. That is to say, I wasn't aware of any such operations. I'll need to check with the council about." "Of course," Dr. Kim said smoothly. "We understand that communication between different Levels of galactic government can be challenging. We've observed similar coordination problems in your handling of the Rigel trade disputes and the Centauri border conflicts. The ambassador's confidence evaporated completely. These humans weren't primitive. They weren't grateful. They weren't even impressed. They were treating him like he was the one who needed to be educated about how the galaxy worked. "Dr. Kim," he said carefully, "perhaps we could discuss this further. I may have made some incorrect assumptions about humanity's current technological level." "That would be helpful," she agreed. "Though I should mention that our diplomatic protocols require us to address certain urgent matters first. We've been trying to contact the mining operations in our system to arrange for their peaceful relocation, but we haven't received any responses." Threx's aide was now frantically trying to contact the council on a secure channel. He caught the ambassador's attention and shook his head grimly. "Sir, I can't reach any of the mining operations. They're not responding to our signals." "It's unfortunate," Dr. Kim said, though she didn't sound particularly surprised. "We did try to contact them directly first, and they didn't respond. To our communications, we had to take more direct action to protect our home system." "Direct action?" Threx asked weakly. "We disabled their operations and relocated their personnel to safe locations outside the Sol system boundary. They're all perfectly fine, just a bit confused about how they ended up in escape pods near the nearest inhabited system." The full implications of what Dr. Kim was saying finally hit Threx. These humans hadn't just returned to galactic society. They'd been watching, learning, and preparing for 20,000 years. And in the space of a single week, they'd systematically dismantled 17 major industrial operations without anyone in the galaxy even noticing until it was too late. Back on the Council's Emergency Command Center, Chief Analyst Park Minho was delivering the worst news of his career to a room full of panicking officials. His hands shook as he read from his report, each word making the situation sound more impossible than the last.
False.
The mining operations didn't just go silent, he explained. They were surgically removed. No violence, no destruction, no loss of life. The humans somehow transported entire industrial complexes and their crews across dozens of light years without anyone detecting how they did it. The council members sat in stunned silence. This wasn't first contact with a primitive species. This was a demonstration of power that made their most advanced technology look like stone tools. Sir Park continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "They didn't just survive isolation, they've been preparing. For 20,000 years they've been watching us, learning from us, and building something we don't understand." The reality of their situation was finally becoming clear. Humanity hadn't been hiding in fear. It'd been quietly becoming something unprecedented in galactic history, and now they were back, politely asking for recognition while demonstrating that they didn't actually need anyone's permission for anything. "Ambassador?" Threx stared at Dr. Kim's calm smile and realized that everything he thought he knew about diplomacy was about to change. The humans weren't asking to join galactic civilization. They were announcing that they'd moved beyond it. Over the following days, as more diplomatic exchanges took place, the true scope of what humanity had accomplished began to emerge. Each conversation revealed another impossible detail, another technology that shouldn't exist, another achievement that made the galaxy's greatest accomplishments look like children's toys. Dr. Kim Hajin had agreed to a series of formal discussions. With the Galactic Council and with each meeting, the representatives found themselves more bewildered than before. The human doctor spoke casually about things that should have been impossible, describing humanity's activities over the past 20 millennia, as if she were discussing a weekend hobby project. "You have to understand," Dr. Kim explained during one particularly memorable session when we left Earth, "we weren't running away from anything. We were running toward something much bigger than any of us could imagine at the time." Council Chairman Vexstar, a being who had negotiated treaties between dozens of species, found himself struggling to maintain his composure. "Dr. Kim, our records indicate that humanity possessed only basic space travel technology 20,000 years ago. Chemical propulsion, primitive life support systems, nothing that would suggest capability for the kind of projects you're describing." Dr. Kim nodded thoughtfully. "That's true. We were barely taking our first steps into space when the council formed. But we had something that served us well during our long journey. We had time, and we had motivation. She gestured to someone off-screen, and the view expanded to show more of the ship's interior. What the council members saw defied every law of physics they thought they understood. The space inside the ship was vast beyond comprehension, with multiple levels stretching into the distance, each one containing what appeared to be complete ecosystems. The Perseverance is what we call a generation ship, Dr. Kim continued. But that's really too simple a term for what it actually is. It's a world, a complete biosphere capable of sustaining not just human life, but thousands of different species we've collected during our travels. Engineer Lee Dong-woo appeared beside Dr. Kim, a quiet man with gentle eyes, who spoke with the kind of understated confidence that comes from solving impossible problems on a daily basis. The technical specifications might interest you, he said, pulling up a holographic display that made several council members gasp. The numbers were staggering. The ship was indeed the size of a small moon, but its internal structure was so complex that it contained more living space than most inhabited planets. The power systems alone generated more energy than entire star systems used, yet somehow did so without any detectable emissions or waste products. How? Chairman Vexstar asked weakly. How is any of this possible? Dr. Kim's expression grew more serious, and for the first time since the conversations began, real emotion entered her voice. Because we had to learn. Because we had no choice. But to become better than we were, she paused, looking away from the screen for a moment as if gathering herself to share something deeply personal. When she looked back, there were tears in her eyes. We didn't leave Earth from pride, she said quietly. We left from grief. Our world was dying, Chairman. Not from war or disaster, but from something much worse. We were losing the ability to sustain the very life that had created us. The council chamber fell completely silent. Every representative leaned forward, understanding that they were about to hear something that would change how they saw everything. Earth's ecosystems were collapsing, Dr. Kim continued. Species were going extinct faster than we could catalog them. The oceans were changing, the atmosphere was becoming unstable, and we realized that we were about to lose something precious. Beyond measure, not just our own lives, but the incredible diversity of life that had evolved over billions of years. Lee Dong-woo picked up the explanation, his quiet voice carrying across the vast distance between their ships. So we made a choice. Instead of trying to fix what was broken, we decided to preserve what we could. We built these ships not just as homes for humanity, but as arcs for life itself. The holographic display changed, showing a cross-section of the ship's interior. Level after level revealed different environments. Vast forests with trees that reached toward artificial suns. Ocean systems complete with coral reefs and swimming creatures. Grasslands where animals grazed peacefully, and even polar regions, where ice-adapted species thrived. Each of our 12 ships carries complete ecosystems, Dr. Kim explained. But we didn't stop with Earth's life forms. During our 20,000 years of travel, we've encountered dying worlds throughout the galaxy. Planets where civilizations had collapsed, where natural disasters had destroyed habitats, where species were facing extinction. We became collectors, Lee added with a small smile. Wherever we found life in danger, we preserved samples. Genetic, material, breeding populations, entire ecosystems when possible. The Perseverance alone carries genetic information from over 1 million different worlds. God. Chairman Vexstar struggled to comprehend what he was hearing. You're saying that your ships are essentially mobile planets carrying the preserved life of thousands of worlds. Not just preserved, Dr. Kim corrected gently. Living, growing, evolving. We've spent 20 millennia learning how to be gardeners on the largest possible scale. We've become experts at creating and maintaining life, at helping species adapt to new environments, at building sustainable ecosystems that can thrive for millions of years. That's when something extraordinary happened. A new voice joined the conversation, but it wasn't coming from any human on screen. It was clear, musical, and seemed to come from everywhere at once. Hello? The voice said pleasantly. I am GAIA-7, the ship's primary AI system. Dr. Kim asked me to demonstrate some of our capabilities for your council. Before anyone could respond, something incredible began happening. Every translator in the council chamber activated simultaneously. But instead of the usual mechanical translations, they began speaking in perfect, native-level fluency in languages that some council members hadn't heard in decades. GAIA-7 was simultaneously translating the conversation into every known galactic language, complete with cultural context and emotional nuance. But that was just the beginning. On the main display, complex mathematical equations began appearing and solving themselves faster than the council's greatest mathematicians could follow. These weren't simple calculations, but theoretical problems that had puzzled galactic scientists. For centuries, at the same time, music began playing throughout the chamber. It was unlike anything any of them had ever heard, a symphony that seemed to capture the essence of life itself. Some delegates found themselves crying without understanding. Why? Moved by harmonies that spoke directly to emotions they didn't know they had. GAI-7 is currently managing life support for 50 million humans, Li Dongwu said casually, as if discussing the weather, plus environmental systems for several trillion other organisms across thousands of different habitats. She also handles our navigation, research projects, cultural preservation, and educational systems. And I'm composing that symphony in real time, GAIA-7 added cheerfully. Based on the emotional patterns I'm detecting from your council members, I thought it might help facilitate better communication between our species. Chairman Vextar stared at the display showing the mathematical solutions. These were problems his best scientists had been working on for decades. And this AI was solving them while simultaneously doing thousands of other tasks. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No artificial intelligence can handle this level of complexity while maintaining such sophistication in multiple areas." Gaia-7 isn't just an artificial intelligence, Dr. Kim explained. She's the evolved, a result of 20,000 years of development, created specifically to help us understand and preserve life in all its forms. She's not just a computer. She's our partner in the greatest project ever attempted. "I prefer to think of myself as a gardener," GAIA-7 said warmly. "A very, very large gardener with some unusual tools." Li Dongwu grinned at that. "Gaia-7 handles our daily operations." Oh, she's modest about it, but she's probably the most sophisticated intelligence in the galaxy. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just survived their 20,000 years of isolation. They had used that time to become something unprecedented, combining advanced technology with a deep understanding of life itself. They had become the galaxy's preservers, quietly saving countless species while the rest of galactic civilization focused on politics and resource disputes. And they had returned not as conquerors, but as guardians, carrying with them the genetic heritage of millions of worlds and the knowledge to ensure that life itself would continue long after current civilizations had crumbled to dust. The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted 14 hours, and by the end of it, half the AGC delegates were having nervous breakdowns. What had started as curiosity about humanity's return had quickly transformed into something much more frightening: the realization that they were dealing with a species that had evolved far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Council Chairman Vextar paced back and forth in front of the assembled delegates, his usual calm completely shattered. "We have a problem," he announced unnecessarily. "A very big problem." The hegemony's representative, General Thok, slammed his armored fist. "On the table, they're a threat. Clear and obvious threat to galactic security. We need to assess their military capabilities immediately and determine how to contain them." "Contain them?" squeaked the delegate from the Peaceful Commerce Alliance. "Did you not see what they did to those mining operations? They relocated entire industrial complexes across dozens of light years without anyone even noticing. How do you contain something like that?" But the hegemony had built their entire identity around being the galaxy's dominant military force. They couldn't simply accept that humanity might be beyond their ability to handle. Within hours of the council session ending, They had assembled their most impressive dreadnought fleet and dispatched it toward human space. Admiral Krex commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Inevitable Victory, a massive warship that had never lost a battle. He was a career military officer who had spent his entire life studying warfare. He approached the human situation like any other military problem. Assess the threat, find the weakness, and apply overwhelming force. What do we know about their military capabilities? He asked his intelligence officer as they approached the Sol system. Lieutenant Colonel Zex consulted his datapad nervously. Very little, sir. The ship appears to be heavily armored, but we can't detect any obvious weapons systems. Their technology seems to be based on principles we don't understand. Every ship has weapons, Admiral Krex said confidently. And every weapon has a counter. We just need to figure out what we're dealing with. That's when the communication came through from the human ship. Dr. Kim. As if she were greeting old friends rather than a fleet of warships that had come to assess whether her people needed to be destroyed. Admiral Krex, she said pleasantly. Welcome to the Sol system. We received word that you were coming to evaluate our capabilities. We thought it might be easier if we simply showed you around. Would you and your senior officers like to take a tour of the Perseverance? Admiral Krex blinked several times, unsure if he'd heard correctly. In his 30 years of military service, no one had ever responded to a show of force by offering guided tours. Dr. Kim, I think there may be some misunderstanding. We're here on official hegemony business to assess potential security concerns. Of course, Dr. Kim replied. That's exactly why we're offering the tours. We believe in transparency, Admiral. We'd rather you see what we're capable of directly than have you make assumptions based on incomplete information. The Admiral looked around his bridge at his confused officers. This wasn't how military confrontations were supposed to work. The humans should be either cowering in fear or preparing for battle, not offering to show off their ship like proud homeowners. Admiral, his tactical officer, whispered urgently, this could be a trap. They might be planning to capture our command staff. Admiral Krex considered this, but his curiosity was stronger than his caution. Very well, Dr. Kim. I'll bring a small security detail aboard your vessel. 2 hours later, Admiral Krex was standing in what could only be described as a paradise, and his entire understanding of military engineering had completely collapsed. The humans had transported him and his officers aboard the Perseverance. Using some kind of technology that didn't involve shuttles or transporters, and now he found himself in a vast space that shouldn't exist. Welcome to Section 7, said Security Chief Choi Ji-woo, cheerful woman who seemed more like a tour guide than a military officer. This is one of our recreational areas. Admiral Krex stared in disbelief at what surrounded him. He was standing in what appeared to be a complete amusement park, complete with roller coasters, games, and thousands of humans enjoying themselves. Children ran laughing between attractions, while adults relaxed on benches, eating what looked like cotton candy. This is impossible, his intelligence officer muttered. The energy requirements for maintaining artificial gravity across this much space. The structural engineering needed to support moving attractions inside a starship, ... It can't be done. Oh, this is just a small section, Choi Gi-woo said casually. We have 12 different recreational zones, each with different themes. The kids particularly enjoy the water park on level 15. Though the anti-gravity sports complex on level 23 is pretty popular too. Admiral Krex activated his emergency communicator. To contact his fleet, command, this is Admiral Krex. I need to report that the humans have. They've built theme parks on their warship. Sir, I don't know how to fight theme parks. The response from his flagship was immediate. Admiral, please repeat that transmission. Did you say theme parks? Confirmed. They have roller coasters, games, and what appears to be a complete carnival inside their ship. And this is apparently just one small section. Choi-gu led them through corridor after corridor, each one revealing something more impossible than the last. They passed through manufacturing areas where machines were casually building devices that looked more advanced than anything in the hegemony's arsenal. They saw agricultural sections where food was being grown in quantities that could feed entire planets. They visited research laboratories where humans were working on projects that Admiral Krex's scientists couldn't even begin to understand. Your defensive systems? Admiral Krex asked finally, trying to maintain some semblance of his original mission. Where are your weapons? Weapons? Choi Ji-woo looked genuinely puzzled. Oh, you mean security systems? Well, they're integrated into the ship's structure, but they don't really look like what you'd traditionally call weapons. She gestured to what appeared to be a decorative wall panel. For example, this section can generate defensive fields that would stop any known projectile or energy weapon. And those flowering plants over there can produce atmospheric modifications that would safely incapacitate any hostile boarding parties. Engineer Lee Dongwoo joined them at that moment, carrying what looked like a tablet computer. Admiral, I thought you might be interested in seeing our manufacturing capabilities. Currently building replacement parts for some of the mining equipment we had to relocate. He showed them the tablet, which displayed a three-dimensional model of what Admiral Krex recognized as a hegemony heavy cruiser. We've been studying your ship designs through intercepted communications, Lee explained cheerfully. Interesting engineering choices, though we could probably improve the efficiency by about 300% with some minor modifications you could build. Our ships? Admiral Krex asked weakly. Oh, easily. Our manufacturing systems could probably reproduce your entire fleet in about 4 days. Might take a bit longer if you wanted the improvements, but the basic designs are pretty straightforward. That's when Gaia 7's voice filled the area around them, speaking with her usual pleasant tone. I hope you're enjoying the tour, Admiral. I should mention, for the sake of accuracy, that the Perseverance is actually the smallest and least advanced of our 12 ships. The others have been exploring different regions of the galaxy, collecting data and specimens. They're all significantly larger and more capable than this one. Admiral Krex felt his knees go weak. If this impossibly advanced ship was the weakest of 12, then humanity possessed more military power than the rest of the galaxy combined. And they were showing it off like a hobby project. Defiant Hope is particularly impressive. GAIA 7 continued conversationally. She's about 3 times the size of the Perseverance, specializes in terraforming and large-scale ecosystem management. The Endless Journey focuses on deep space exploration and has some fascinating defensive capabilities. Choi Gu noticed Admiral Krex's pale expression and smiled sympathetically. Don't worry, Admiral, I know this is a lot to take in. Would you like to see our educational facilities next? We have some excellent programs on conflict resolution and peaceful cooperation, very popular with visiting dignitaries. Admiral Krex realized that everything he thought he knew about military power was obsolete. The humans weren't just technologically superior, they had redefined what was possible. They had built ships that were simultaneously weapons of unimaginable power and peaceful sanctuaries for millions of beings. They had created technology that could reshape planets and artificial intelligences that could solve any problem. And they used it all to preserve life rather than destroy it.
Dr. Kim
Said quietly into his communicator, I think we need to have a very different kind of conversation. The tour continued for several more hours, and with each new revelation, Admiral Krex understood more clearly that humanity had moved beyond the need for traditional military power. They had become something unprecedented, a civilization so advanced that they could accomplish anything they wanted, but wise enough to use that power responsibly. When he finally returned to his fleet, Admiral Krex had only one recommendation for the hegemony: make friends with the humans, because fighting them wasn't just impossible, it was pointless. Admiral Krex turned to his flagship with a head full of impossible sights and a report that would change everything. But when he tried to explain what he'd seen aboard the human ship, his superiors didn't want to hear it. The hegemony had built their entire identity on being the galaxy's dominant military force. And the idea that humanity had made them obsolete was more than their pride could handle. You've been compromised, General Thok declared during the emergency. War Council. Those humans obviously used some kind of mind control technology on you. No species could have developed the capabilities you're describing. Admiral Krex tried to explain about the theme parks, the manufacturing capabilities, the casual way the humans had demonstrated technology that shouldn't exist. But the more he talked, the more convinced his superiors became that he'd been somehow manipulated. Sir Krex said desperately, "I'm telling you, fighting them isn't just inadvisable, it's impossible. They could destroy our entire fleet without breaking a sweat, but they won't because they don't want to hurt anyone." "Weakness," General Thok spat, "showing us mercy because they know they can't win a real fight. We'll show them what happens when they threaten hegemony interests." Within hours, the largest military fleet in galactic history was assembled and heading toward the Sol system. Over 1,000 warships, including the hegemony's most advanced dreadnoughts, all armed with weapons designed to crack planets open. It was a show of force meant to remind the galaxy who really held power. Dr. Kim Hajin watched the approaching fleet from the Perseverance's command center, her expression sad rather than concerned. Around her, the ship's crew went about their daily business tending gardens, teaching children, conducting research, playing games. Life continued normally, even as the greatest military force in the galaxy approached with obvious, hostile intent. "They're not going to listen to reason, are they?" asked Captain Yoon Sujin, a woman whose calm demeanor never wavered, even in the most stressful situations. "No," Dr. Kim replied quietly. "Fear makes people do terrible things, even when they know better. GAIA-7, please prepare defensive measures. Try to avoid casualties." "Of course, Dr. Kim," the AI responded. "I have some ideas that should resolve this situation with minimal harm to anyone involved." The attack began at exactly 14:30 Galactic Standard Time. Over 1,000 ships opened fire simultaneously, unleashing enough destructive power to shatter a moon, energy beams that could melt through the thickest armor, missiles that could level cities, and weapons that bent the laws of physics, all focused on the human ship. For about 3 seconds, space around the Perseverance lit up like a small star as the weapon struck. Then something extraordinary happened. The attack simply stopped working. Every energy beam was absorbed harmlessly into the ship's hull. Every missile was gently redirected away from its target. Every exotic weapon designed to bypass conventional defenses was neutralized, as if it were nothing more than a light show. Impossible. General Thok screamed from his command ship. "Nothing can withstand that much firepower." That's when the hegemony fleet discovered what real advanced technology looked like. One by one, their ships began shutting down. Not exploding, not being destroyed, just quietly powering down as if someone had flipped an off switch. Gaia-7 single quotes, his voice reached every ship in the fleet simultaneously. Speaking in the native language of each crew member, "Please remain calm," she said pleasantly. "Your ships have been temporarily disabled for your own safety. No one will be harmed." Admiral Krex, watching from his disabled flagship, felt a mixture of vindication and terror. This was exactly what he tried to warn his superiors about. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were demonstrating that the entire concept of military force was obsolete when dealing with their level of technology. But Gaia-7 wasn't finished. As the hegemony fleet floated helplessly in space, something began broadcasting across every communication channel in the galaxy. At first, it seemed like random noise, but then the pattern became clear. They were recordings. Military communications, political meetings, private conversations between hegemony leaders spanning the past century, and the content was horrifying. Casual discussions about genocide, orders to eliminate entire civilian populations. Corruption so deep that whole species had been enslaved to enrich hegemony officials. War crimes committed not in the heat of battle, but as deliberate policy decided in comfortable meeting rooms. "Where did you get these recordings?" General Thok demanded, his face pale as his own voice described the cleansing of a peaceful mining colony. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for 20,000 years, Dr. Kim replied sadly. "We kept hoping you would become better than this. We kept waiting for evidence that galactic civilization was growing more peaceful, more just. Instead, we found this." The effect across the galaxy was immediate and devastating for the hegemony. Species that had been forced into their alliance began declaring independence. Worlds that had suffered under hegemony rule rose up in revolution. The evidence was too clear, too detailed to deny or dismiss. Within days, the hegemony's vast empire began collapsing as member species fled to seek protection elsewhere. But humanity didn't gloat over their enemy's downfall. Instead, Dr. Kim addressed the entire galaxy with a message that would be remembered for millennia. Humanity didn't spend 20,000 years becoming powerful to conquer the galaxy, she said, her words reaching every inhabited world simultaneously. We became powerful to protect it. We've seen too much life destroyed by those who choose violence over cooperation. We won't let that continue. Captain Yoon Soo-jin appeared beside Dr. Kim, her expression kind but firm. Every species that wants to join us in preserving life across the stars is welcome. We'll share our technology, our knowledge, our resources. We'll help you transform your worlds into paradises where every being can thrive. She paused, looking directly into the camera. But those who choose destruction, who profit from suffering, who treat other beings as disposable, you'll find yourselves very much alone. We won't destroy you, but we won't tolerate you either. The offer was simple, but revolutionary. Humanity would share their incredible technology with any species willing to commit to protecting life rather than destroying it. They would help transform barren worlds into gardens, teach civilizations how to live sustainably, and provide the tools needed to create true post-scarcity societies. The only price was a commitment to preservation over destruction. Within months, the entire structure of galactic civilization transformed. The old council dissolved and reformed around humanitarian principles. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves working together on projects to restore damaged ecosystems and preserve endangered life forms. The former hegemony worlds became test cases for human technology. Planets that had been strip-mined and polluted were restored to pristine condition in a matter of weeks. Populations that had lived in poverty suddenly found themselves in abundance, with technology that could provide anything they needed without harming their environment. But perhaps the most significant moment came 6 months after the failed hegemony attack. Communications Officer Bae Soyoung was monitoring long-range sensors when she noticed something that made her smile. "Dr. Kim," she called out calmly, "you need to see this." On the main display, 11 massive energy signatures were approaching from different directions across the galaxy. Each one was even larger than the Perseverance, and their arrival had been timed to the day. "The garden ships are coming home," Bae announced to the ship's population. For 20,000 years, humanity's 12-generation ships had explored every corner of the galaxy, learning, preserving, and preparing. They had rescued dying species, collected knowledge from a million worlds, and developed technology that could reshape reality itself. Now they were returning, bringing with them the genetic heritage of countless civilizations and the wisdom to use power responsibly. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when the Protectors finally came home, as the first of the sister ships appeared in human space. Its hull gleaming with technologies that made even the Perseverance look primitive, Dr. Kim smiled. With deep satisfaction, humanity's long journey was complete. They had left Earth as refugees from a dying world, and they were returning as guardians of all life in the galaxy. The age of conquest was over. The age of preservation had begun.